All right, y'all, welcome to the Scott Horton Show. I'm the director of the Libertarian Institute, editorial director of antiwar.com, author of the book Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, and the brand new Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism. And I've recorded more than 5,500 interviews since 2003, almost all on foreign policy, and all available for you at scotthorton.org. You can sign up for the podcast feed there, and the full interview archive is also available at youtube.com/Scott Horton Show. All right, you guys, on the line again, I've got Hassan El-Tayyab from the Friends Committee on National Legislation. That's FCNL.org. That's the Quaker lobby in the interest of peace up there in Washington, D.C. Welcome back to the show, Hassan. How are you doing?
Good.
All right, so Yemen. Even better, War Powers Resolution. Tell me, what is the news on the War Powers Resolution HJ 87 in the House of Representatives right now, sir?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for, having me on again. Always appreciate it. So, Reps Pramila Jayapal, DeFazio, Schiff, and Mace, they introduced HJ Res 87, the Yemen War Powers Resolution to terminate all U.S. military support for the Saudi-led war and blockade on Yemen. I'm very excited about this. We've got a ton of momentum right now. Over 100 bipartisan co-sponsors and counting in the House. Senator Sanders is getting ready to introduce a companion on the Senate side, and hopefully we'll see that sometime in July. And I think this all comes at just such a critical moment as the Biden administration, Biden himself, is planning on going to the Middle East to talk to Saudi Arabia, other GCC Arab states, and they're getting ready, I think, to sign a new security agreement with these countries and further entangling the U.S. into potential more Middle East escalation.
Yeah, I mean, that's such an important point here. So we have a real confluence of things going on here where the Saudis seem to be seeking a way out of the war. They climbed down from their major goal of reinstalling the last dictator. They've entered into the ceasefire in these talks. At the same time, they've got the ruler of the world empire coming to bend his knee to their will. Your Majesty, Your Highness, what can I do for you in order for you to ramp up oil production for me? That's Joe Biden's line. Everybody knows he's going to say it a month before he even has a chance. So then the question is, what has bin Salman going to say to him? Well, I want my war still. I want another 20 F-15s. Or is he going to say, I could really use your help wrapping up this war? Or is Biden going to say, listen, I know you're under a lot of pressure here and all this, but I got the entire Congress breathing down my neck that we've got to wrap up this war. Is that even going to have a part in the conversation? That's our role here, is trying to make sure that he has no choice but to say, listen, the legislature back where I'm from is really upset about this now, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And, if U.S. pressure to end the war, I think the Saudis, the Emiratis, and their proxies could easily push to escalate fighting once the truce that just got extended to August 2nd. They could escalate the fighting once that all ends. And, obviously the Houthis would respond in kind, regardless of consequences for civilians. And, so that could be a disaster. However, if we build up support for this Yemen War Powers Resolution and hopefully pass it, and I think we have a real solid pathway in the House of Representatives, that would effectively ground the Saudi Air Force and significantly limit Saudi Arabia's ability to keep fighting. And I know Mohammed bin Salman is eager to avoid the humiliation of being able to operate his own Air Force. And the prospects represent a key factor in his apparent decision, I think, to encourage his Yemeni partners to renew the ceasefire. So we have a lot of leverage here. The truce so far has been successful. Give credit where credit is due. The Saudis halted airstrikes and allowed, dozens of fuel ships in. We've got, I think, about 10 flights from Sana'a Airport into Jordan and Cairo so far. So that's good. The Houthis have ceased trans-border attacks on Saudi and the Emirates. Humanitarian groups that I've been speaking with, like the World Food Program, say that there's been access to populations. But, this only continues, I think, if the U.S. maintains pressure. And if we make clear that, no, there's not going to be any military aid to resume hostilities, then we have a real shot here at ending this war and ending this humanitarian crisis.
Yeah, well, as you say, they're working on this new sort of Israeli slash Arab NATO in the name of hemming in Iran right now. And of course, that's the excuse for this war, that somehow the Houthis represent an Iranian beachhead in Yemen. What's the truth of that?
Yeah, so I think, this to me seems like a potential boon for weapons dealers. That's what it usually is about. Folks wanting to sell these defense systems, and I'm not saying that Iran is completely behaving like Boy Scouts out there, but I think it's really clear to me that selling weapons is a huge part of what this is about. Normalizing relations with Israel, but if we truly want peace, they'll tell you that this new NATO for Gulf states, and this integrated air defense system that they're talking about setting up. They say that it's about peace and stability, but it doesn't get at the root causes of what's actually making the Middle East unstable, which is one, a lack of communication, a lack of a deal with Iran. So we urge that we get back into the Iran deal. There's flaws with that approach, in my opinion, but I think it's the best thing we got right now. We got to end this war in Yemen, try to end U.S. support for the Saudi coalition, try to get a nationwide ceasefire that's permanent. And also deal with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And that's how we actually bring about peace. But further entangling the U.S. military to be this regional hegemon doesn't encourage, Saudi and Iran to share the Middle East. It just increases impunity for Saudi Arabia's horrible behavior.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, that's just totally true. As we saw the last time, I'm sure you and I discussed this the last time, Congress passed the War Powers Resolution, and yes, Trump did veto it. But the UAE then immediately pulled their main army. They left their militia on the ground, including AQAP, but they pulled their main ground force out of the country, and they sent an ambassador straight to Tehran. And I can't remember, I think it was just when Biden announced, and it was a lie, but he announced that he was ending support for the war in very early February 2021 when he first came into office. And then the Saudis immediately sent ambassadors or diplomats, whoever it was exactly, I'm not sure, to Baghdad to meet with the Iranians. And so we could see how, there's this mythology that America has to hold the whole world together. It's all going to tear itself apart. But it turns out that actually Saudi and Israel like to talk a lot tougher because they know that we have their back. But if they had to handle business on their own rather than launching a war, they're much more likely to launch a diplomatic effort to resolve conflicts, which is just the same. Obviously, it's a moral hazard, same in economics, right? If you tell a Wall Street bank they'll get a Greenspan put, then they're going to make loans to people who can't pay them back. That's just how it is.
If you shield them from all accountability and all consequences for their actions, then they're going to misbehave. But you're right, absolutely. When we saw, negotiations for a cessation of hostilities over the port city of Hodeidah, Yemen's largest port, in 2018, U.S. actions were critical in influencing what happened. Congress had just passed a War Powers Resolution, and they agreed to, that Hodeidah ceasefire the same day. And then the Congress basically forced an end to mid-air refueling of Saudi warplanes. So, and then we saw a real reduction in cross-border attacks by Saudi and the Houthis. So we have this whole historical pattern of when Congress reasserts its Article 1 war authority, when Republicans and Democrats come together and do something productive, it actually really helps. And so this new Yemen WPR You know, it invokes Congress's constitutional war powers under the War Powers Act in 1973 to terminate that participation. And, if passed, this resolution, it's designed to prohibit the U.S. military from providing things like intelligence sharing, logistical support, the maintenance, the spare parts. And all of these are critical. The entire Saudi air fleet is absolutely dependent on the daily transfer of these, just the spare parts and maintenance alone could ground these planes. So we have a ton of leverage here. The Saudis don't want to risk that, despite, the posture that they're giving that, we're not going to, despite the posture, they really are dependent. And I think if we exercise all the leverage that we have, we could end this war.
Yeah. Look, I totally agree with that, but I admit too, it's a slippery slope argument. People are coming to me on Twitter and saying, look, so I call my congressman, then what? Well, if enough of us call, and it's going to take tens of thousands of calls, it's going to take a real movement. It's going to take some celebrities picking this thing up and retweeting it or something. I don't know, something big. We need to get it passed. We need to get it passed with huge margins, especially if we can get it passed with veto-proof margins. That'd be nice, although maybe that's just a fantasy. But we definitely need to get it passed with huge margins. And then there's a real question right there, whether Biden would just do like Trump and veto the thing, or whether he would say, okay, well, I did say I was ending the war and now I have Congress kind of. I think politically it'd be tougher for him to veto it than it was for Trump, but maybe not that much tougher. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's going to take a lot of pressure. And then he's got to be able to say to the Saudis, look, man, I kind of don't have a choice here. We want to move forward on our new NATO, and we want to move forward on, you lowering my gas price and these kinds of things. We're going to have to wrap up this war rather than, okay, I'll let you keep the war going and I'll help you keep it going as long as you do what I want on these other issues. And so that's, look, unless the Senate is going to remove the president from power, he can do whatever he wants, right? He is the world emperor. If he wants to declare war on the Houthis and send the infantry tomorrow, they can't really stop him. He reserves the right for a nuclear first strike on non-nuclear weapon states.
Yep.
So he can do whatever he wants. But the question is the politics of the situation. It's not the rule of law and the Constitution. It's the politics of the situation. Is there this massive groundswell of pressure that insists that something be done about this now or not? That's really what it comes down to. And then we hope that the dominoes fall down in the right direction to really push this thing to a close. I hate to say that, but it is what it is. Not a limited republic.
I think what you're saying, I agree with a lot of what you're saying here, and getting that groundswell of support, changing the politics and the political dynamics. I would argue the fact that we even have a ceasefire, the fact that Biden even took the steps he has already, granted not far enough, but I think it was an improvement to end support for the targeting assistance that did happen, or at least allegedly happened under the Biden administration. Those policy changes were, in as a result of all this congressional pressure and civil society pressure. So, that needs to continue. I swear, every single day I check the co-sponsor list, and it just, every day we get a couple more and a couple more. And in less than 3 weeks, we have over 100 co-sponsors on this bill. And this isn't just AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, much respect to them, but it's a very diverse coalition, not just super progressives that are behind this effort. We have frontline Democrats. We've got, Republicans like Rep. Mace. We've got Freedom Caucus folks and other libertarian folks as well, like Andy Biggs, Rep. Gates. Marjorie Taylor Greene just got on the bill as well. Go SAR. When you've got AOC and Go SAR on the same bill, you're on to something, I think. I think it's just super important that we have a bipartisan resolution here, and that's what's needed to continue to build that support and show that there's not going to be a military solution that involves the U.S. military in this war in Yemen. If this truce breaks down, the U.S. is not prepared to keep this going. And I think it's also going to send a message to the White House that, it's got to keep its promise to end blind support for a regime that's intent on cracking down on dissidents at home, cracking down on, people that are doing activism to, promote women's rights in the country, destroying Yemen, creating this world's worst humanitarian crisis. And, I'm clear-eyed. The United States can't unilaterally bring about, a complete end to the war. Like there are still issues to resolve. We have to, the humanitarian crisis will still be there, but it's got to use its leverage to persuade Saudi and its proxies to stay at the negotiating table and actually bang out a deal that finally ends this war. And Congress is really, in my opinion, the best hope we have to do that. And as far as all the legislative vehicles out there or anything that can be done, this is probably the best lever we have right now to make sure that, we don't give away the farm in any deal with Saudi.
Sorry, hang on just one second. Hey guys, anybody who signs up to listen to this show by way of Patreon will be invited to join the Reddit group. And I'm going to start posting stuff over there more. That's patreon.com/Scott Horton Show. Thanks. Hey, y'all, libertasbella.com is where you get Scott Horton Show and Libertarian Institute shirts, sweatshirts, mugs, and stickers and things, including the great Top Lobsters designs as well. See, that way it says on your shirt why you're so smart. Libertas Bella, from the same great folks who bring you ammo.com for all your ammunition needs, too. That's libertasbella.com. You guys check it out. This is so cool. The great Mike Swanson's new book is finally out. He's been working on this thing for years. And I admit I haven't read it yet. I'm going to get to it as soon as I can, but I know you guys are going to want to beat me to it. It's called Why the Vietnam War: Nuclear Bombs and Nation Building in Southeast Asia, 1945 through 61. And as he explains on the back here, all of our popular culture and our retellings and our history and our movies are all about the height of the American war there in, say, 1964 through 1974. But how did we get there? Why is this all Harry Truman's fault? Find out in Why the Vietnam War by the great Mike Swanson. Available now. Yeah, well, that's really great that you mentioned, more and more of these Republicans signing on. I didn't know that Green had signed on. I saw that Matt Gaetz had. Of course, Thomas Massey's good on it. And that's just so important for the narrative. This isn't a bunch of hippie crap, This is, which, look, a lot of people, anti-war is just some hippie girl in a sundress or whatever, which I like hippie girls in sundresses, but I'm just saying you don't have to always listen to their opinions about international relations. What do they know? And people think that. But the thing is, we have lots of really nice hippie girls in sundresses, and we also have...
Maybe be in a better place if more people did listen to those.
Yeah, seriously.
Decent sundresses, but...
It's true, but then the thing is we have them, but then we also have right-wingers, avowed right-wingers, nationalists, America Firsters, people who, to them, conservatives are the liberal Republicans. Like the conservatives used to be the right compared to the liberal Republicans. These people are against it too. Donald Trump said America first. America first means, well, and yeah, he continued the war for 4 years straight, strictly for the money. But he said America first, and that means it's okay to not believe in this crap and to not want to continue it. And that's the most important part, is that it's a good, solid, money-saving, blowback preventing conservative position to be against all this adventurism in foreign policy. And after all, when you read Obama's excuse for starting this war, it wasn't that the Houthis had done anything to us. His Central Command was passing them intelligence to kill Al-Qaeda guys with at the time that he switched sides in this war, and he did it to placate the Saudis. His administration told the New York Times, well, we had to placate the Saudis because they were upset. You start a 7-year war of genocide and treason to make your client state feel better? And a liberal Democrat did that. That means it's the conservative Republican thing, or even the further right Republican thing to oppose it. Should be easy enough,
Yeah, well, and I think that bipartisanship, obviously we're in a very fragile moment in our democracy where it seems like there's not a lot we agree on these days, but you know, this is really something that we can all agree on. That we should not be supporting the Saudi war in Yemen. We know it's worked in the past to kind of de-escalate the situation. One thing I did want to mention, though, it's really unclear to me, and I think others and others that I've read, that are really following this closely, that even banging out a deal with Saudi Arabia, I mean, it's not probably going to affect oil prices all that much in the short and medium term. And, I think the verdict's really still out if, Saudi Arabia could even, significantly, ease the prices at the pump here
That's
in the
such an
U.S.
important point. I mean, look, it's not like there's a restriction in supply, or I mean, there is in a few places from some regulations and so forth. But for the most part, the problem is monetary inflation. They devalued the money. And then they blame everybody for raising their prices, except for the people who devalued the money in the first place and forced them all to. And that goes for the local, hot dog stand and for Exxon too.
You know, so I just think that's an important point. Some people like, well, maybe if we can get them to lower prices, maybe, Yemen's just the sacrificial lamb in a deal like that. But I think we gotta think bigger than that. Think we got to be clear-eyed on, like the fact that there is not, 100% guarantee that this is going to affect U.S. prices of fossil fuels all that much. To me, I think this is kind of a warning that, it might be nice to get off of, fossil fuels to begin with and transition to more renewable energy in the medium and long term, because it just shows you how vulnerable we are when we're relying on these authoritarian petrostates to actually, help us, fuel our economy.
Yeah. And, there's the pressure of the arms industry. We saw this especially during Trump. And I know it's the New York Times, but they talked to Pete Navarro in the article. You could say it was somewhat unreliable because it was the Times, but it's worth to read. And I think it's pretty clear that Raytheon and Pete Navarro set up this relationship in order to essentially what happened was the Trump tariffs on China had angered industry because it disrupted so many supply chains and so forth. And so Pete Navarro said, well, I know how we'll keep the manufacturing sector happy. We'll funnel billions directly into Raytheon, as though that's the manufacturing sector. But anyway, that was what they could do, was give these direct transfer welfare payments to the arms industry. And then, well, they needed a place to shoot all those missiles at people. So it was, and when it came to him vetoing the bill, according to the New York Times, it was pressure from Raytheon on Pete Navarro, who told Trump, you can't go along with this war powers resolution. You have to veto it and keep the war going. And it was directly at the behest of the lobbyists for the cruise missile manufacturers. So, I mean, you can't even make up stuff like that. I guess the New York Times could, but they weren't. That's the reality. That's the shape of politics in America. The arms industry has simply captured our national government. You might not even call it a national government at all. It might just be the actual implementation arm of Lockheed and Raytheon Incorporated, with access to all of our pocketbooks.
So I think this is just super important. One piece of hope I'll give is that, when we do this stuff in public, I've noticed over the past, several years I've been working specifically on this conflict in Yemen, is that when we do stuff in public, we tend to win because no one wants to have to go on Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, or wherever to explain why they supported the Saudi-led coalition's bombing of school buses in hospitals and weddings in Yemen. So they don't want to do that. And that's why I think the War Powers resolution is so great and so important, because it can get votes on the floor. And when you get those votes on the floor, people have to vote yes or vote no or vote present. Those are their options, or not show up at all, which some do. But then they have to actually explain their vote, and primary challenges happen if they vote the wrong way. So That's what I would urge people to do, is continuing to force the questions, not just here, but everywhere. If we've got troops in Syria, we got to ask, why are we still in Syria? Or why do we have, military engagements all over the world fighting this war on terror when it just seems to, make the war on terror worse? So we have to start asking these hard questions and putting votes on the floor for people to, say yes or no to. And this Yemen situation, to me, is a model of how we need to, go moving forward. For population and folks in the country that actually want to see a more humane and accountable foreign policy.
Okay, I got one more rant, then I'm going to turn it over to you for one more question. And this one is just for people if you live in a Republican district. Oh, you might know this. Here's my preface for this. As promised, the Libertarian Party is at your service, you and the Yemen peace activists. And I'm glad I stuck my neck out on that. It turns out we won unanimously in Reno every single position on the LNC and all the judicial committees and all of those things. And our first major project as the new Libertarian Party is this issue. And we've got an email campaign and a Twitter campaign going on trying to get all of our members to corral everybody to call their congressman. And if you ain't on Twitter and you ain't heard, let this be your call to action right here. It's 833 Stop War. And we're trying to see if we can generate. And what are we going to do with the Libertarian Party? Who knows what we even can do with it? Sky's the limit. Let's try it out. And so we want to see if we can generate tens of thousands of calls. Of course, the broader libertarian movement is much larger than the party. And so everybody's welcome to do this. And what you should do is, look, and I know this, you've told me this before, and other activists have told me for years and years on the show. For you people who are willing to go to D.C. and do the work and go to Capitol Hill and deal with these people, the calls make a difference, especially when they're coming in large volume. They really do make a difference. So what we're doing is everybody call 833 Stop War. You put in your zip code, they'll connect you right to your congressman. It's not perfect, but it usually works. Connect you right to your congressman. And then if you live in a Democratic district, tell them Biden wants to end the war. He said so. And so this is how to support the president, is by passing this thing to strengthen his position so he can end the war. And then you're just asking them to do the right thing and support their president, right? And then if you live in a Republican district, tell them you're a Republican. Tell them America first. Tell them we're tired of policing the world, wasting all this money. And did you know we really are on the side of Al-Qaeda, not against them? And this one at this time, it's crazy. And Obama started it, and Brandon sucks at implementing it. And it's just, we should end this thing now, right? And talk to them like what they want to hear about how voting for this resolution, HJ 87, the War Powers Resolution, is consistent with who they are and what they believe. You're not asking them to change from one thing to another. You're asking them to do the America First thing or do the good, peace, love, and liberal thing and vote for this resolution. And so, and it works. On the margin, it works, but that's the whole point, is we're trying to move the margin here, okay? And so now, Hassan, my last question for you is, could you please talk about the different groups and the different activists who are working so hard on this in a way that, so that people who are interested might join some groups and really do more than make a phone call, but might really participate in this, might figure out how to donate to some of these groups, might figure out how to, recommend these groups to their Aunt Cindy or whatever it is to get involved in this thing, man?
Well, first off, one great group that's doing a ton of work on this is the Libertarian Party. Y'all have been doing incredible things. I've just been seeing your social media tweets. You're getting hundreds and hundreds of people retweeting and sharing. I mean, you're probably like the main hub of like where all the social media activity is coming from. So huge kudos to you. We have over 100 national organizations. We've got, folks on the right like Concerned Vets for America, Defense Priorities. Freedom Works is on board as well. So, if you want to plug into their anti-war work or their Article 1 work, trying to restore congressional war authority, I suggest you get there. If you want to, support humanitarian assistance, Yemen Relief and Reconstruction Foundation, Dr. Aisha Juman is a good friend of mine, but yemenfoundation.org, you can make a contribution. They empower local Yemenis in Yemen, go figure, to actually do humanitarian work, and they get to parts of the country that not a lot of other people do. As far as the grassroots advocacy side, FCNL, that's my organization. Go to fcnl.org and you can sign up to become part of our advocacy teams. And we literally are just focusing on ending this crisis in Yemen, supporting the war powers resolution all year long. That's what we're doing every single day of 2022. That's our main focus. Demand progress is great. Just foreign policy is great. And again, there's just such a great coalition right now working on all this. And it's exciting to be a part of it. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, well, that's great. And listen, I mean, we found this out too with the Mises Caucus and kind of building the movement to take over the party. That it's a lot of friendships in there, a little bit of romance, a little bit of dope smoked, and a lot of good new friends working together. A beer's drunk. I should have mentioned that. Probably more beers than the other thing. Just not my thing. But so yeah, it is a lot of fun, a lot of community building, and get it out from in front of your Facebook and get out there in the world and deal with people and do something important, something that you can remember and be proud of. And look, I really think, hey, we might swing and miss, but I think there's a real chance that if we do all this work together, we all at the same time are doing this just for a few weeks, right? Everybody's not going to turn into Hassan and Scott, the Yemen obsessed activists on this, but how about just for 2 or 3 weeks? Can we get you to be a Yemen guy for 2 or 3 weeks and we'll go right back to guns or inflation, whatever it is? But like for 2 or 3 weeks, let's put this first. Let's see if we can flood them with tens of thousands of calls and get your mom and your boyfriend and your girlfriend and your coworkers and, your next door neighbors and do the multiplier effect. See if you can get 5 or 10 or 20 people. Make it a contest. Get people to call. And then if we can get the deluge, we get the resolution passed, we put the pressure on the president, and he puts the pressure on the monarchies, and the war comes to an end. And it sounds like a slippery slope argument, but you know what? It's what we have to do. It's the advantage that we have to press, and we can do it. I mean, and you're leading the way, you and Aisha Juman and all these other great activists who I'm trying to follow here and keep up with on all of y'all's great work. So, man, it's been 7 years. We can't have this conversation again in another year. We have got to do this. I mean, it was a year ago we had this conversation, remember? This is it. We have to win this time. So come on, everybody. It's 833-STOP-WAR. 833-STOP-WAR. It'll connect you right to the people. If you need a couple talking points, go to 1-833-STOPWAR.com. You got to put the 1 in it. 1-833-STOPWAR.com. They have a couple talking points there, especially left-leaning ones. But be creative. Talk to your congressman. Talk to the staff. I know when I was on the phone with you guys the other day, can't remember who it was that said they just were talking to congressional staff members, and they were saying, please keep the calls coming. We need the calls. And these were staffers who were already won over, but they need a cudgel to beat the boss over the head with. Boss, the phone won't stop ringing. We've got to vote on this the right way. That kind of thing. They need that message to be able to push our message. So when they're asking explicitly, would you guys make our phones ring? Then I think the answer has to be yes. We'll do everything we can to help. Right?
You got it, man. Well, thank you so much for always, lifting this issue up and giving it the attention it deserves.
Cool. Well, thank you, man. I sure appreciate you coming on the show again, Hassan.
Of course.
All right.
The Scott Horton Show, Anti-War Radio, can be heard on KPFK 90.7 FM in LA, APSradio.com, antiwar.com, scotthorton.org, and libertarianinstitute.org.